Good afternoon, everyone. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് Sunday സ്കൂളിന്റെ വൈസ് പ്രസിഡന്റ് സജിയച്ചൻ will be joining shortly, and Director Jeet and curriculum developing George Aramath, who is going to take the class for today, and all those who are joined for this Zoom meeting of our Sunday school in our archdiocese. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God. Amen. ഇത് ഒരു വളരെ സന്തോഷകരമായ ഒരു അവസരമാണ്. ഇന്ന് ഒരു പള്ളിയിലെ കുർബാനയ്ക്ക് ആദ്യമായിട്ട് പോയി, നമ്മുടെ കത്തീഡ്രലിൽ നിന്ന് മാറിയിട്ട് മറ്റൊരു പള്ളിയിലെ പെരുന്നാളിന് പോയി ജസ്റ്റ് വന്നുള്ളൂ. എനിവേ ഞാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞ നാളുകളിലൊക്കെ ഓരോ പള്ളികളുടെയും കമ്മിറ്റികളുമായിട്ട് മീറ്റ് ചെയ്തു, എല്ലാവരുമായിട്ട് സംസാരിക്കുമായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോ എല്ലാവരും അതിൽ ഞാൻ മെയിനായിട്ട് ഉൾപ്പെടുത്തിയിരുന്ന കാര്യമാണ് സൺഡേ സ്കൂളിന്റെ കാര്യം. സോ എവരി വൺ, all of them, they are very happy that we could start the online classes and sessions without any delay once we had this lockdown and everything. അപ്പോൾ അതിനെ നാഷണൽ ബോർഡിനെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഞാൻ അപ്രീഷിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാണ്. കാരണം നാഷണൽ ബോർഡ് നമ്മുടെ സൺഡേ സ്കൂളിന്റെ ടീം വളരെ വേഗം തന്നെ, എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത് by the end of March or early April, you came together and developed this platform and encouraged all the Sunday schools to start the online classes, which they followed actually. എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു മിക്കവാറും ഒരു more than 90% of our Sunday schools are doing online classes, and they are very effective, and the churches are very happy, the achans are very happy, the committees are very happy, and so I just want to share that appreciation towards the Sunday School National Board. ഇന്നത്തെ ഈ മീറ്റിംഗ്, ഈ ക്ലാസ് എല്ലാവർക്കും പ്രയോജനകരമായി തീരട്ടെ എന്ന് പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കുന്നു. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ജോർജ് ഇതിന് നേതൃത്വം കൊടുക്കുന്നു. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ജീത്ത് ഇതിനാവശ്യമായ എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും, അതിന്റെ ടെക്നിക്കൽ, അതിന്റെ മറ്റ് കൺവീൻ ചെയ്യാനായിട്ടുള്ള എല്ലാ അറേഞ്ച്മെന്റും ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നു. എല്ലാവരെയും നന്ദിയോടെ ഓർക്കുന്നു. സൺഡേ സ്കൂള് വലിയൊരു പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു ഓരോരുത്തരുടെയും ലൈഫിലെ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട വിഷയമാണ്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങൾക്ക് ഈ പാൻഡമിക് സിറ്റുവേഷനിൽ അവരവരുടേതായിരിക്കുന്ന സ്ഥലത്ത് അവരുടെ സൺഡേ സ്കൂൾ ടീച്ചേഴ്സിന്റെ ഒരു നല്ല വാക്ക്, ഒരു സാന്ത്വനം അവർക്ക് കിട്ടുക എന്നുള്ളത് വലിയൊരു ആശ്വാസമാണ്. just to be with them, to hold them together in this situation. അതിന് നമ്മളന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിരുന്ന പോലെ കരിക്കുലം എത്രത്തോളം കവർ ചെയ്യാന്നുള്ളതോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എക്സാം എങ്ങനെ നടത്താമെന്നുള്ളതോ ഒക്കെ അത് they all are secondary things, but what really matters is letting them close to God and letting them be at peace. അതിന് വേണ്ടതായ ഒരു ക്രമീകരണങ്ങളാണ് നമ്മൾ ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടെ എല്ലാവരും അപ്രീഷിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നു. നമുക്ക് പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കാം. കൃപകഴ്ച ഭാജനമേ നിന്നിലുദിച്ചോരേഖസുതൻ തൃക്കരൾ ഞങ്ങളിൽ അലിവാന്തൻ വക്കലപേക്ഷയണയിക്കേണം. പരിശുദ്ധന്മാരെ നിങ്ങൾ പ്രാർത്ഥിപ്പിൻ കർത്താവോടായി, അടികളെയും തൻ കോപത്തിൻ വടികളെയും അയച്ചിടാൻ. സ്വർഗസ്ഥനായ ഞങ്ങളുടെ പിതാവേ, നിന്റെ തിരുനാമം പരിശുദ്ധമാകപ്പെടണമേ, നിന്റെ രാജ്യം വരണമേ, നിന്റെ തിരുവിഷ്ടം സ്വർഗത്തിലെ പോലെ ഭൂമിയിലുമാകണമേ. ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ആവശ്യമുള്ള അപ്പം ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് തരണമേ, ഞങ്ങളുടെ കടക്കാരോട് ക്ഷമിച്ചതുപോലെ ഞങ്ങളുടെ കടങ്ങളും പാപങ്ങളും ഞങ്ങളോട് ക്ഷമിക്കണമേ. പരീക്ഷയിലേക്ക് ഞങ്ങളെ പ്രവേശിപ്പിക്കരുതേ, പിന്നെയോ ദുഷ്ടനിൽ നിന്ന് ഞങ്ങളെ രക്ഷിച്ചുകൊള്ളണമേ. ഇതുകൊണ്ടെന്നാൽ രാജ്യവും ശക്തിയും മഹത്വവും എന്നേക്കും നിനക്കുള്ളതാകുന്നു. ആമീൻ. കൃപ നിറഞ്ഞ മറിയമേ, നിനക്ക് സമാധാനം, നമ്മുടെ കർത്താവ് നിന്നോടുകൂടെ. സ്ത്രീകൾ നീ വാഴ്ത്തപ്പെട്ടവളാകുന്നു, നിന്റെ ഉദരഫലമായി കർത്താവേ യേശുമിശിഹാ വാഴ്ത്തപ്പെട്ടവനാകുന്നു. ശുദ്ധിയുള്ള കന്യകയും മർത്തമറിയമേ തമ്പുരാന്റെ അമ്മേ, പാപികളായ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് വേണ്ടി ഇപ്പോഴെപ്പോഴും ഞങ്ങൾ മരണസമയത്തും ദൈവം തമ്പുരാനോട് അപേക്ഷിച്ചുകൊള്ളണമേ. ആമീൻ. ഇതിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവരെയും ഓർക്കുന്നു. ഇത് ക്ലാസ് എടുക്കുന്ന ജോർജിനെയും പ്രത്യേകമായിട്ട് ഓർത്ത് എല്ലാവരെയും ദൈവസന്നിധിയിൽ സമർപ്പിക്കുന്നു, പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കുന്നു. ദൈവം അനുഗ്രഹിക്കട്ടെ.
Thank you very much, Thirumeni. Sajjachan joined you there now.
Yes, I'm here. Jeet, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Acha.
Thank you. Barkumar Thirumeni, Jeet, George, our beloved HMs, and all our teachers. Good afternoon to you all. I think this is a great opportunity to praise the Lord as we get to come together though COVID-19 separated us physically, it allows us to connect with others. Each of us are trained in our own areas, and we are responsible to do our part for our team. As a priest, I am responsible to lead of the members of my parish in a spiritual way. I think the teachers are responsible to lead their children, the children in the Sunday school, in a spiritual way. I do remember before my ordination, our beloved Tirumeni told me to go for higher studies. I thought it was hard, but now I understood why it was beneficial to me and my life to serve in a parish where he assigned. Likewise, I hope and pray that this meeting will be helpful for our beloved teachers to understand our own discernment about our call as teachers, especially in this hard time. And also, in the past, in the West Coast, we were not able to attend such meetings before because the travel difficulties. But though this corona made us physically separated or kept away, but I believe it is also beneficial to join us through the new, like the virtual meetings or calls, and appreciate all the coordination of beloved Jeet and the great leadership of our beloved Archbishop, our beloved Tirumeni, and Jeet was coordinating all this, and George is a great advantage for all our team for coordinating this, and good luck and the prayerful wishes for all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeet. Thank you, Barkumar Tirumeni.
Thank you, Acha. And again, this was a team effort by all the board members. So so on behalf of all of them, thank you again for everyone for joining. I would like to turn this over quickly to Dr. George Aramath, as Tirumeni had mentioned, and Achin, the curriculum director. At the very end part, we will have a few quick announcements. I'm doing that at the very end, though. So stay tuned after we are done. George, it's all yours.
Great. Great to see everyone. I see a lot of uncles and aunties and many faces that I haven't seen for a long time. Thanks be to God that we're able to be in this virtual environment to see each other. We have this technology to see your lovely faces. I do ask, if you are on Zoom, please do mute yourself and turn on your video if you can. I would love to see your faces. It makes it much more personable if you turn on your video. So I can see everyone. If you are uncomfortable doing that, I mean, that's okay, but I would love to see everyone. Great, I'm seeing so many familiar faces. Great to see everyone. So I'm going to, as you see on the screen that I have, share a couple of the participant norms before we begin. First is, if you have your profile, if you can put your name on your profile, and most of you do that. I see most of the names. If you don't, you can go to more under participants and rename yourself so that your first name shows. Keep your microphone on mute unless you're speaking. We will use the chat function in between, so you can type in some of the answers. And as I was saying, please do keep your video on so I can see you and see the feedback that you give as we go through this session. I appreciate you doing that. The agenda for today, what we're going to do, before we go into the agenda, one thing I forgot is our director is 1 year wiser at this moment because his birthday was yesterday. So I don't know if everybody knew this, but happy belated birthday to Jeet, our director. 1 year wiser, and many ways wise in many ways as well. So as we continue in the agenda, what we're going to do is look at classroom strategies for virtual learning. And I want to look at 3. And in the 3, we're going to go through a little bit in depth for each of the 3. I wanted to keep this limited to 3. There are many more, but with the limited time, I want to mention top 3. And if you have notes, please do write them down so that you remember this. Have it written down someplace. Otherwise, you'll think, oh, this is good. And then in August, you'll forget a lot of these things. We are human beings. So please do write them down somewhere so you can remember it at a later time. And at the end of the session, there will be 5-10 minutes to answer questions. So if you have questions in between, please do save them to the very end. and then we'll have time to address it because there are certain things I want to go through with you first. So the first thing, number one, best teaching practices. I want to talk about what are the best teaching practices in general. One of the most common questions that I hear, and I work in a school district, I work with principals and teachers. When we're moving into a virtual classroom, the common question I hear is, how do I change my teaching into a virtual classroom? What are the best strategies for teaching in a virtual classroom? If you look at this, it shows 6 different strategies that are important in teaching. These are strategies that are important in live classrooms, in-person classrooms. And what I'm going to share with you is these are important strategies for virtual classrooms as well. It's important that we continue these practices. So the question of what do I do in a virtual classroom, the answer really is you should do these things ×2. You should double down on doing these things. Whatever are best practices in an in-person classroom, you should especially do those strategies in a virtual classroom. What I mean by that is sometimes we forget about these best strategies and do other things. It's really about doing those same things and making sure we double down on it even more. It's more important, it's more critical in a virtual classroom. In this virtual classroom that we have, for instance, Zoom that we're using, Zoom and any virtual platform, you have so much more distractions. As a student, and you're my students here right now, you're distracted by things that are happening in your home. You're distracted by your phone that's right in front of you. You're distracted by somebody else who might get your attention. You're distracted by the screen in front of you. So when you're teaching in a virtual classroom, there's more distractions. Because there's more distractions, we have to make sure we are doing those strategies to keep the attention. And this verse that I have, or this quote that I have here, is a quote that marketing people use. The quote says, it used to be that the most valuable thing on the planet was time. But right now, what they found is the most valuable thing on the planet is what? Attention, right? Is attention. This is a marketing quote, but this is also true for teachers and for education. We have to get the attention of our students first. From attention, are we able to move to comprehension and all the other things we're doing? We have to get the attention of students. This is critical, especially in a virtual classroom. So what is the best practices of teaching? Well, the ones that I labeled, that I put on there, you have to double down. You have to make sure that you do those best practices in a virtual classroom. And those are the ones that I have listed here. All these things, we should be doing them. Now, one that I want to focus on is building relationships. This is critical. We have to build relationship with our students, even if we're doing things virtually. Sometimes we think we jump into a lesson, start talking, teach a lesson, and say bye-bye and leave. We don't have that personal connection. Building relationships is critical in a virtual classroom. And a professor of mine shared this quote. He said, in this high-tech society, we need to have, what is it? High touch, right? In this high-tech society, we need to have high touch. And it's one of these quotes that always stuck with me because high tech, high touch, right? The point he's trying to make is we have to have human connection, even in virtual classrooms. This is important. This is critical. We need to have human connection. It's important that we have this high touch. So how do we have human connections in a virtual classroom? Well, one way, you saw this as you entered the classroom today. And please do make sure everybody is muted as you're coming in. One of the ways that you can do this in building relationship, an easy way, is having an entry question. Simply, as students come into your virtual classroom, have some simple question that they're answering on the chat box. It's a way to build relationships. It's a way for children to express who they are and the teacher to show who they are. So as you saw, as you entered here, I asked a simple question. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live? And many of you put Kerala, great to see. Some of you said, I just want to live where I'm currently living, great to see. Some of you put things like Paris, Scotland, I saw that. This is a way, a simple question at the beginning, just have a question you have displayed or ask it as students enter and they're setting up, and then you're able to start afterwards. It's just one strategy to build relationships with your student. It's a simple one, but it doesn't take too much time. These other ones that we have here, the 6 that are listed here, we talked about building relationships. We'll talk about the other ones as we go through the different parts of this training. But I wanted to emphasize on this first part here, building relationships is critical. And one way you can do that is have an entry question. Some question you have at the beginning as they're entering that they can answer on the chat. A simple question that they can answer. That's one way to build relationships. Now, I'm going to move into 1B. This is the most important. I put stars next to it. Critical, most important. If you take one thing from this training, this is the one thing I want to emphasize. That one thing is changing of pace. Change the pace of your lesson. And I'll explain what this means. What this really means is you need to have a beginning activity, a middle activity, and an ending activity. And those 3 things should be something different.
If you just start the video again.
Where is the video?
That you're doing amongst these 3. So again, the change of pace is critical. At the beginning, you have something. In the middle, you have another activity. At the end, you have a separate, different activity. And let me explain why this is important. When Corona hit and we were in social isolation, I had to work from home. My wife, she's in the medical field, so she has to go to work, but I was able to work from home. And when I worked from home, what I noticed is I had to make sure I kept my kids attentive, and they had to do something during this time they were at home. So one of the things that I did, and a friend of mine shared this, and I had a series on this for More on TV, is I set up a schedule for the students, for my kids. This is for my kids. You probably have done this as well. This is a sample schedule. At the beginning, we have an activity, we brush our teeth, we have evening or morning prayer, and then we have Malayalam class. My mom is helping teach the Malayalam class, it's virtually. And then one of my daughters is doing Malayalam class, the other one is reading. And then when one is done, they switch. Then they have a math lesson, then they have lunch. Then after lunch, they have a piano and typing. They practice their typing, and then they switch. One person plays the piano, when they're done, the other person goes. And they have a writing activity. What I'm sharing here is this kept my students, or I keep saying students, this kept my children active because there was a change of pace. If I told my students, or if I told my kids, go ahead and do homework in the morning, homework is too broad. That's a lot of things they could do. It's just one thing. When you have this change of pace, change of activity, it creates an illusion of speed where time appears to go faster because you're doing different things at different times. So in a lesson, having a change of pace is critical. Different activities at different times. It creates an illusion of speed so that your classroom appears to be going faster because you're doing different things. And it keeps the topic engaging and energetic so that they're focused, their attention, remember that's critical, that their attention is kept. So change of pace is the most important thing I will tell you that you do in your virtual lesson, having some change of pace. And I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like. But before we do that, I'm going to change the pace now, and you'll see how this gets your attention. We're going to go into breakout rooms. I'm going to put each of you in a room with 3 people. And this is a feature in Zoom that we have, so I'm able to do this. As you go into the breakout room, I wanted you to think about what are some change of pace strategies that you can do in the classroom? And I give you one example. One thing you can do to change the pace, so your kids are doing something different, is maybe you might ask them to give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down to a question. If you agree, give me a thumbs up. If you disagree, give me a thumbs down. That's a change of pace activity. Very small. It might take 5 seconds, but it changes the pace, right? I wanted you to think about other examples that you can think of. What are some other ways that you can do change of pace activity? And I'm going to put you into breakout groups. And in the breakout groups, you'll have 2 minutes. So you can unmute yourself when you go to the breakout room. Make sure you unmute yourself and share some change of pace activities that you can do in a virtual classroom. And you'll have a timer at the top. And after 2 minutes, we'll come back to our whole group session. So you're going to be going to a breakout room with 3 people, 3 or 4, and then share some share some change of pace activities with each other. Share as many as you can, and then we'll come back afterwards. Ways that you can do some change of pace activity. And let me set up my screen again so I can see everyone. Different ways that you can do change of pace activity. The point that I want to make here, as you see on the screen now, there are 3 change of pace activities that I would say is minimum that we all do. You might have mentioned other ones, but I'm going to talk about 3 that are minimum that we all should do. You should have a beginning activity, a middle activity. Middle activity is usually your lesson. That's the one that you always do. But then also having an ending activity. At least 3 minimum change of pace. What we usually do is the middle one, but we need to have at least 3 minimum change of pace activities. Again, this is to keep the attention of the students and to engage them in a virtual platform where their attention can be spread out in different ways. So to give you an example of this, another way of changing pace activity is warm up at the beginning, a lesson, and a wrap up. These are different words that we can have. I shared this in a training before. Some of you have attended my training before where I talk about a warm-up activity and a wrap-up activity. The thing that I really want to emphasize with you in virtual platform is we need to make sure we do that even more in a virtual classroom. Don't forget about that strategy. That was important in person. It's even more important in a virtual classroom. So I want to say it again, and I want to give you an example of this again, because it's very important that you have a change of pace activity, at least 3, beginning, middle, and end. So let me give you an example of this, what this looks like. So we are going to pretend we're in a 6th grade classroom. So I am your 6th grade teacher in Sunday school, and you are my 6th grade students. And this is a very big class, 113 people. But yes, all of us are here in this classroom in 6th grade. So let's pretend we're moving into this classroom, and I'm going to take on the role of the teacher. We just did an entry question, the same question you answered. So we did that entry question. And now when you're coming into the classroom, I'm going to give you this opening activity. This is the question I wanted you to answer. What was one of your most memorable road trips that you took with your family or your friends? And why was it memorable? So think about, and you might even think about when you were a child. What was one of the most memorable road trips in your car, somewhere that you went? What was one of your most memorable road trips with your family or friends, and why was it memorable? This is something I wanted you to think about. Let me share my answer. Mine was, when I was growing up, it was our road trip to Niagara Falls. I still remember it. We were in New York at the time. It was memorable because it was only a couple of hour drive, and Niagara Falls was one of the most beautiful sights that I remember. And I was able to spend time with my family and my parents and my brother in that road trip. That's mine. Now I want all of you to think about what might be a road trip that was most memorable and why was it memorable. And I'll call on one person to unmute themselves and share it. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about this, 10 seconds, and then I'll call on one person. Okay. So let me ask if Justin, if you're okay with this. Justin, if you can unmute yourself and share what was one of your most memorable.
I would probably have to say one of my most memorable road trips was with my friends when I went to Philadelphia in, I believe it was in 7th grade. It wasn't really a road trip. It was actually a school trip, a class trip that we went to Philadelphia. And, I just remember, visiting the Liberty Bell and learning so much about our U.S. history. And then it was just amazing because I later moved to Philadelphia when I attended Drexel University. I was spending 5 years of my life over there. So that memory always sticks to my head, knowing that was, over 15, 20 years ago. That trip never fades in my mind.
Great.
So I would have to say Philadelphia was probably one of the most memorable trips.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you, Justin, sharing that. So if you had more kids, since we have 114, I'm not able to have everyone. You might have the kids share this, or you might have them put it on the chat box, write it down if you need to save time. But this is an opening activity. Now what we're going to do with this opening activity, as you see on this slide here, or on my presentation, and I'm going to zoom it so you can see it a little bit better. This lesson that we have is from grade 6. Lesson 11, which is the road to Emmaus. And this is the opening activity in this lesson. As you see here, the opening discussion is what is the most memorable trip. So why we do this opening activity is now in this lesson, I'm going to have you learn about, as you see here, let's learn about a memorable journey by 2 people and an unexpected visitor. This was right after Christ's resurrection. 2 people were going to Jerusalem to a village called Emmaus. And this is the reading that we have. This is the middle part of the lesson. So you read the lesson, you would read this with the students. And at the bottom of this, the conversation that they have in this road trip, you can have 2 kids that are assigned that would read. One person is Jesus, another person is one of the apostles there. And they would read this together. And then in the second part here, once you read what Jesus and the disciples talk about, then I'm going to change the pace a little bit, and I'm going to have you, and I'm going to zoom this in so you can see this a little bit better in the right spot. I wanted all of you to read this last 2 paragraphs that begins, Jesus went in to stay with them. So go ahead and read those last 2 paragraphs on your own. You can mute yourself, everybody's muted. Go ahead and read that on your own. I'll give you 30 seconds and then we'll come back. So again, read those 2 paragraphs that begin with Jesus went in to stay with them. Okay, now I'm gonna ask you a question. Thank you for reading that on your own. I'm gonna share with you a question and I'm gonna launch this. I wanted you to answer this question on your Zoom. When did the disciples recognize Jesus for who he was? Go ahead and answer that question. Go ahead and put in your answer. And when you give this poll question, you're able to see how many kids are active, because I see about 10% of the participants are either sleeping or they're somewhere else. So I'm going to end the poll now so that everybody can see the answer. So here I can share with you what everybody had put. And about 85% of you had chosen when Christ gave them bread at the dinner table. Yes, that's when they were able to recognize Christ, and it has deep theological meaning as well. It is at the Eucharist table that we know Christ for who he is, right? So that's the reading that I wanted to share with you. And then after this, we're going to have a activity as a closing activity. Is this in this text that you see here? And we're going to sing this song together for this closing activity. And you don't need to unmute yourself. But this is a song that we sing at the the gospel, after the gospel reading in our church, which is this reading from on the road to Emmaus. And it's the same tune as Yajaman and Maruan Nedam, right? So y'all can sing along with me. You can sing it even though you don't need to unmute yourself, but sing along with me as we sing this song. On the road to Emmaus, 2 disciples walked, and the Lord appeared, and he walked along with them. Those men did not recognize their Lord, and he asked them how their master died. They said he was crucified. Some say he rose up. Then the Lord blessed and broke bread, and their eyes opened. Hallelujah. They saw it was him. Now, the reason I sang that song for you was not to show you my singing skills, but the reason is this is a change of pace activity. Did that capture your attention? If you weren't paying attention before that, it did capture your attention. I don't know if it captured 10% of you, probably not yet, but the rest of you, like, you might have caught the attention because it's a change of pace, something different that you did, right? This is an opening activity with a question, then the ending activity was a song. This example is a song, and it captured the attention, and you could have the kids sing it again one more time, because the song is reinforcing the key part of the lesson, but it's reinforcing the lesson in some different way, some different activity, right? So going back to this, the opening activity and this lesson that we did, here what we did in this change of pace activity, as I said, 3 minimum. The beginning activity in this lesson was a personal question I asked them. I asked a personal question that anybody can answer, a road trip. You're also building relationships with that question, if you notice. It's a good way to build your relationship. And I shared something about myself, so my kids know more about me. We're building relationships too. Then the middle activity was you read the lesson, and I didn't assign readers, but you could have assigned kids readers so they would read back and forth. And then we did an independent reading activity where you were reading by yourself, a separate part of the lesson. And it was only 30 seconds you did this, but that was a change of pace, right? You read it, we read it as a class together, and then I had you read it on your own for 30 seconds. So that changed the pace. And then at the end of it, we changed the pace again by having a song. So it's something different. So each of those moments were each of the different scenes that were cutting back and forth. And that's the way we keep attention. If you watch commercials, you'll see the scene constantly changes, because that's how you keep people's attention. If it's just one camera all the time that's looking at one scene, people's attention goes away. But when there's cameras that are multiply changing, it keeps people's attention. So you might be thinking, George, I do this already. My lesson is like this. I will tell you, do you really do this already? You have to think about this. Because most people, when they do their Sunday school lesson, they open up the chapter, they start reading, maybe kids might read it, and then they end with the questions at the end. It's all from the book. Everything is from the book, and it's just this one activity generally that we do. Read the lesson and answer questions. It's very different when you have something different. You have a question that they answer, you have them read it on their own, and then there's a song, for instance. So it's 3 different scenes that are happening here. So the point that I'm making here in this first part is best practices for teaching. We continue it, but one of the most important things besides building relationships is that we have a change of pace activity. A beginning part, a middle part, and an end part that is different. At least 3, minimum of 3 is what I'm asking here. Now, one thing that I want to share here is a strategy you can use to change the pace of activity is an independent reading activity. We forget about this. We always go to default, we read it out loud, or we have the kids read it out loud. When you tell kids, now I want you to read this one paragraph on your own by yourself, it gets kids' attention. Because if somebody was not paying attention when you're talking and you say, read it on your own, it brings them back to attention. And then you can just have the kids turn off their camera. You can have a timer running. So you'll tell them, I'll give you 1 minute to read this. You can tell them underline key sentences as you're reading it. And then after they come back, you give them some question based on what they read. I gave you the poll question, right? Something that you read. You might ask them, what's something you underlined while you read? And you have them come back and share that. This is a change of pace, right? Because now they're doing it on their own. So everybody's paying attention, and then you come back. So this is one way to do change of pace. So for this first one, I shared best practices, and this is a review. Entry question for building relationships, beginning with the beginning, middle, and end activity, a change of pace. And the last one is an independent reading activity that you can do for the middle part of your lesson that you can have. Now, I'm going to make a plug here since I'm the director of curriculum, so it's a good time to share this. I'm excited that we have new books in our diocese. What's great about this is our new books in our diocese have these activities already there. The new books have an opening activity and have a closing activity already in it. We have the new books for grades 1 to 6. Grade 5 and 6 is being finalized in India. We already have the books for 1 to 4, 1 to 6, and grade 10 also has opening activities at the very end of the book. So these things are there. So use them in your virtual classroom. Don't ignore it or don't go to the middle part of the lesson. Remember, you need to use them in one way or the other. And I would say if you're teaching in grade 7, 8, and 9, or 11 and 12, these 5 grades, you don't have the books. You just have to plan how you would add an opening activity and an ending activity at the end, right? Opening and ending activity. Make sure you plan that somehow. The rest of you who are teaching these grades, it'll be in your book, so just make sure you do use them for your virtual class. Now, we're going to move into advanced virtual strategies. The first one was best practices. Everyone should be doing the first one. Now we're going to move into advanced strategies. What are some advanced things you can do that you can't do in an in-person classroom? That's what I'm going to talk about. The first is using a video. You can use a video in a virtual classroom, right? You couldn't possibly do this in an in-person classroom because you would have to have a TV, and many of our Sunday school classrooms, you don't have that luxury, right? Now, since kids are already on a laptop, you can share a video with them. This is one of the advantages. Now, one thing that I want to mention, if you are sharing videos, if you find a video on YouTube or something, if you are sharing a video in your lesson, I want to give you one important caveat or one important disclaimer. And it's this one here. This is a graph that you see here. And in this graph, it gives you information about how you can use video and something important when you do use video. I wanted you on your chat box to look at that video, look at this chart, and don't hit enter yet. Just type in your answer. Again, don't hit enter. Wait till I say hit enter. So just type in your answer in the chat box. The question that I wanted you to answer is look at this graph and tell me after how many minutes when kids watch a video does their attention go down? After how many minutes when kids watch a video does their attention go down? Just type it on your chat box. Don't hit enter. Again, don't hit enter. So type in your answer. After how many minutes does the attention of the students go down when they watch a video? Go ahead and type it. Don't hit enter yet. Okay, go ahead and hit enter. Tell me your answers. Great. Most of you are close to it, as you see in the chat box. As you see here, if you're watching a video with kids in your virtual classroom, it really dips here when it gets to 9 to 12. So if your video is more than 9 minutes, the attention span of the kids, the percentage of kids that are watching it goes down, dips. So what I'm telling you here is don't show a video. If you have a 30-minute class, you're like, oh, I'm going to show a video for 20 minutes. I don't need to teach. Let's just have them watch a video. No, that's not good practice. After 9 minutes or so of a video, the kids' attention goes somewhere else. They're distracted. So if you are sharing a clip, it's better to show shorter clips of the video and do something else. So if you have a big clip, I would recommend maybe show 2-3 minutes of it, do some other activity, and then maybe show 2-3 minutes of it afterwards. Because what are you doing there? Change of pace, right? Change of pace. Don't do one activity for a long time, because after 8-9 minutes, their attention span is gone. This is from research. They did research and they watched kids. How long do they watch a video online? And after 9 minutes, their attention was elsewhere. So know that if you are sharing videos, you share shorter clips up to 9 minutes, and then you move on to another activity. So advanced strategies online, one is video. You can use video, but disclaimer there is up to 9 minutes of your video, and then you move on to something. The other advanced strategy that you can do is what we just did here. We've done this already, all three of them. One is chat box. You can have a question that kids answer on the chat box. But if you notice for the chat box question I just asked earlier, I asked all of you to type in your answer and don't hit enter. Why do you think I said type in your answer and not to hit enter? Why do you think I did that? Paul, if you can go off of mute and share why you think, Paul, I did that.
To see how many people are listening.
Yes, okay, great. Thank you. Paul, did you want to add something?
I think it's not to bias the next respondent.
Yes, part of it, yes, exactly. That's like the main point. If somebody starts to enter an answer before the others, they see it, they think that's a correct one, and they assume that's it, and then they don't participate. This way, you're having everybody enter something in, and then you say hit enter at the same time, so everybody answer shows up. Because if somebody starts typing 9, and they're like, oh, somebody already answered, I'm not going to answer it. So that's just one strategy on a chat box where you can get everybody to answer, because some kids need a little bit more time to think. You have the kid in your class who's first to answer, but then that prevents the other kids from answering. So one way in chat box is to have them type it in and then say, go ahead and enter now. And then you can see everybody's answer. The other two are in Zoom. Zoom offers this. Polling, where you can ask a question. You saw this when I asked a question about Emmaus. You can have a poll question that they can answer. And the other is breakout groups. These are advanced techniques. I'm not saying everybody needs to do this, but you can do breakout groups to change the pace. So kids, you ask them, I want you to think about this question, and put them in breakout groups, maybe 2 or 3, and then they come back after a few minutes. These are more advanced for folks who think they can do the advanced features on Zoom. So I'm going to talk about the last one, number 3. Number 3 is online virtual platforms. This is a logistical thing. Number 1, we talked about best teaching practices, especially change of pace. Number 2, we looked at advanced techniques on virtual platform. And the last one is I want to just cover what are the virtual platforms you can use. Some of you already know this, but many of you might not know this. You need to consider what is the platform that I need to use in my classroom. I'm going to share the 3 that are the most commonly used and the advantages and disadvantages of these 3 that I've listed. These are the most common. You might do some other ones, but majority, 80–90% use one of these 3 tools that are available. The first one is Zoom. That's the one that I prefer because it offers the most features. Exclusive, as you see in the interactive features, Zoom only offers breakout rooms and polling right now. It's very easy to do breakout rooms in Zoom. The others don't have that. It's very easy to do a poll. The others don't have it. To do a Zoom account, the free ones are up to 40 minutes. If you have a paid one, I have a paid one for work. Some of you may have one for work. You can have unlimited time. But if it's a free one, you can have your class up to 40 minutes. The other is Microsoft Teams. Teams I find to be a little bit more interactive because they offer enhanced chats where you can thumbs up somebody's comment. If you like what they put, you can give them a thumbs up, things like that. They have a whiteboard, you can share the screen, and there's a classroom feature where you can do grading on it. That comes with your Office subscription. So if you have a Microsoft Office, which is like your Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, things like that, Teams is a part of it. You can use Teams for your virtual platform. And the third one is Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts is Google Hangouts Meet is the simplest one, but it's still very effective. We use it at our Ignatius Church. Google Hangout gives you the share screen. You can chat, you can do a classroom, or you can do a Google Classroom with the grade book in it. Those are advanced features, you don't need to use those. But Google Hangouts is free for up to 60 minutes, as it says there. But if you have a G Suite account, and there was a training that Biju Thomas led that we had earlier, churches can get a free G Suite account because you're a nonprofit. You can have unlimited minutes on there. Your church just has to set up a G Suite account on Gmail. But if you have a Gmail account, a Google account, you can use Google Hangout Meets to do these virtual platforms. So these are the top 3 and the most commonly used 3 platforms. So one of the things you have to decide is which of these 3 am I going to use when Sunday school starts in August. It's a decision you should make with your headmaster. And then once you decide which one you want to use, you should practice using it with somebody else. You might have another teacher that you practice using it with. Practice how to do share screen so you can see the screen. Practice how to do chat so you know how to do that, because you don't want to practice it with your kids on that first day in August or September, because then the kids are like, oh, this teacher doesn't know how to use this stuff. And they're zoned out. Their attention isn't there, right? So practice it first with somebody else so that you're familiar with it. So these are the most 3 commonly used, and I ranked them in order of interactive features. Zoom offers the most interactive feature. Google Hangouts, not as much, but it's still useful. I still find it valuable nonetheless. So in this virtual platform, most people say if you're doing a virtual classroom, 45 minutes to 1 hour is the most attention span people have in a virtual class. So I've been talking to you for about 45 minutes. And by now, 20–30% of your attention span is somewhere else. So I need to stop talking. So this is the main points here that I have here. Best practices for teaching. The best practice is the best practice that you should be doing in in-person classroom. I want to reinforce that. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to come up with new strategies. The best strategies are the strategies you should be doing in in-person. Do that same thing in a virtual. That's double important, twice as important. The most important of these, and I put it on here, I put a box, I put a star around it, is change of pace. Of course, build relationships, that's important, but change of pace is most important. Make sure you have some activity that changes from one thing to the other to the other. At least 3 ways you can have change of pace. And then some advanced strategies are using video, chat box, polling, and breakout. And you need to consider what online platform that you will use. That's a decision that you should decide on very soon, and then get comfortable using it before Sunday school starts. So that's a breakdown of all of our strategies and key critical points of doing a virtual classroom. So I'm gonna ask if you have any questions, and I gave like 5–10 minutes. If there are any questions that you wanna ask, please do. You can either come off of mute, or you can put it on the chat box and I can see it on there as well. Anybody have any questions? And we'll give like 5–10 seconds for anybody to come on, because on virtual platform, you need to give people think time. So 5–10 seconds. If you have a question, you can ask it.
George, Elto here, George. I'll go with a question.
Yeah.
Excellent session. A lot of eye-openers for us. Thanks for that. The question is on conducting tests on a virtual platform. In a classroom, you give the question papers, they answer that. And the assessment, any strategies or any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so one of the things you do, and I didn't have time for this because this is a whole new conversation, like what is the place that you keep your grade book and your assessments? Google Classroom is one of those places that you can have it, but it's a little bit more complex. The simplest way is possibly you can have, the most simple way that I found is you can give them a test for them to do and then they print it at home. and then they would take a picture of it and send it back to you or scan it. If you're more familiar with Google Documents, you can have a Google Doc that you send them and then they put it in. But assessments is a great question. Like, we have to rethink how we do assessments in a virtual platform because you're not right there with the students. But the key to assessment is we're assessing if they've learned something. We have to, and this is why I appreciate our diocese moving away from ranking systems and doing all of that. Assessment is making sure that they're learning something. So even if the kids are looking at the book to find the answers, that's still okay. They're still learning, right? We have to rethink what like assessment is, as long as they're learning. And you have to think about what are questions you want to ask. Some of those questions should be deeper questions, not questions like who was the son of Abraham. That's simple questions, but dig deeper in your questions where they can give you, it depends on the grade level, like deeper answers. Some of those are essay answers or questions that you ask them. And some assessments can be verbal, where you ask them verbally, some can be written. So a great question, like you do have to think about what the assessment is, but the main point I would say is the point of assessment is to make sure they learn something. So even if they're using a book, even if they're doing other things, that's okay. They're still learning. That's what's most important.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
This is Marin. I would like to contribute to that assessment question that was just asked.
Yes, please.
I teach grade 9 at St. Peter's, Philadelphia, and I just gave an assessment last week, which was on Google Forms, where you can schedule the test. I had scheduled the test for an hour and a half, like 90 minutes, so they can put in the answers there. And for the first test, I had given an open book test, so which is not necessarily like they can use the book, but actually they would have to kind of explain questions, which is based on the lessons.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And I saw in the chat box, some folks have mentioned like Quizlet is one. There are like online quizzes that you can give. Quizlet is one of them. Like those are more complex, but they're free that you can do. And you can do Google Forms is a question that's free. Microsoft Forms offers this where you can give them quizzes that are online. Somebody had asked, well, is textbook 7 and 9 in the works? It's not in the works. We are waiting. We get the first draft from India, which is very helpful because India publishes it. And I want to give a shout out to the textbook committee team for helping with this. But when we get those books, we will be working on 7 to 9 as well. Is there a share screen option in Google Hangouts was the question. Yes, you can share screen in Google Hangouts. You do have that option, yes.
George, this is Commander George Corral. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yes.
Okay. My question is, first of all, thank you for taking your time and covering this portion. It was greatly helpful. And I understand you covered mainly the textbook portion of it. How do we approach teaching the children about the prayer and Kurbana songs?
Great, excellent question. And great to see you, Uncle. You have a very beautiful name, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes, the great question. How do you teach the Kurbana songs and prayer? Starting off with prayer definitely is important. And then in the new textbooks, we have added a lot more songs, and we've added those songs, especially in grade 5 and 6. Grade 5 and 6, we were able to work on it longer because of this break. So 5 and 6, I'm really excited about those 2 books. But we have a lot of those songs, liturgical songs in the lesson. And there are some songs in between, but great point. Like we need to teach those, but I would say when you teach them, it's ideal if you teach a song related to a lesson because it reinforces it. Just like the song we just did together, that can help kids to learn the lesson, but then also learn a song from the liturgy. Great points. That's a way to like teach those songs. It's in the book, but we need to use them as well.
Thank you.
Yes, and Kahoot, yes, great. Kahoot is another tool. If you look at the chat box, people are giving great suggestions. Kahoot, Quizlet are great tools for giving quizzes online. Somebody else had a question?
Hi, I'm Benita. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. First one was it Anita? You can go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Benita from Fremont, California. So I just wanted to ask you, how do you recommend assigning work like during the week so that they still stay engaged, but it's not so heavy as like, I know all of our kids already have schoolwork to do during the week, but the questions at the end of the lesson, sometimes I feel like it might not be enough. So how do you recommend keeping them engaged during the week so that they're still attentive during the next class?
And what was your name again?
Benita from
Benita, okay. Okay, Benita, it's a great question. Like, some of you may not like my answer to this question, but the most important thing that kids should be doing in between Sunday school classrooms, the best work that you can give them is reading the Bible. Amen?
Amen.
Yes, reading the Bible, that's the most important, right? So if there is a lesson that's coming up, if you just ask them to read the Bible portion for that lesson before that next lesson comes up, I think that's a great step. The kids who can do it can do it. We don't need to create new assignments, create new questions, or create new crosswords, or create new puzzles. You can do that. I'm not saying you don't need to do it. But the most important thing is that we give them the opportunity to read the Bible and establish a habit of reading the Bible. Grade 5 and 6, we have a Bible reading planner in those 2 books. So there's a planner at the very beginning. First lesson is a Bible reading planner for the whole year. They should be reading some portion every day. That's important. So the first thing is, what assignment do we give them? Give them the assignment of reading God's word, reading his scripture. That's most important. And then there are other things. If you want to add things to it, you can make some of the closing activity. In the new books, we have 3 or 4 closing activities. So you might just do one of them in class, and you might say, I want you before class next time, do the next activity. So you might chunk that out so they can do it as homework. That's another way. But again, I reinforce, reading the Bible is the most important homework you can give them.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We can take maybe a couple of more questions. Okay, well, somebody had a question. Absolutely agree with having kids reading the Bible. What would you assign for pre-K? Yes, so pre-K, younger kids, reading the Bible is much harder. So if they're able to read, they can, but there's resources where some of the Bible is much more simple. Like they might have more visual art, things like that. So you might have to find some of those books. Please reach out to me. There's a Bible that is more simple language Bible. There's a version of it that you can use for younger kids. I do this with my girls. They're 8 and 6 years old. So this is a Bible that has more of a younger kid translation that you can use as well. But we always prefer the Revised Standard Version. I know in our church we do, and most churches recommend that translation as well.
George, this is Shiji. So do you recommend teaching with PowerPoint slides, or just reading the textbook is enough?
Yes, great point. And I thank you for reminding me of this, because I just had to turn off my PowerPoint because it's on the screen. PowerPoint, it really depends on how you use PowerPoint. But there's a classes on overkill with PowerPoint where you do too much PowerPoint slides and people don't pay attention. So you have to be very careful how you use PowerPoint. I would say spend more of your time reading the lesson book, looking at the opening and ending activity. Spend more time doing that instead of creating a PowerPoint. If you're spending a lot of time creating PowerPoints, I would rather say plan your lesson. Make sure you know what the opening activity and ending activity are and have something good. And use PowerPoint. Use PowerPoint at a minimal level if you can. If there's an image you want to share, if there's some video you want to share, it's useful. But don't go into PowerPoint overkill, because I see teachers spending 1 hour creating a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
But they could have used that 1 hour to prepare a better lesson. So I would say use the time for better lesson. And
Right.
Tidimini, I appreciate Tidimini's point in the chat box. For the younger kids, you can read them the Bible. Yes, amen to that. So parents can read the Bible to them. That could be a nighttime activity. And some of those simple Bibles, you can read it to them as well.
And do you have soft copies of the textbook?
Yes, so that'll be, we have a closing activity where Jeet will answer some of these questions. So they pay the big bucks to the director, so he'll answer some of those questions for us.
Okay. Thank you. Great presentation, George.
Yes, thank you. So I think that that's up with all the questions. We're going over an hour in our time. So if you have any additional questions, please, I see them in the chat box, I can answer them. Please do reach out to me if you have questions. My email is garamath@gmail.com. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions. garamath@gmail.com is my email address. So there are some questions about VBS and virtual classrooms that have come up in between. But again, I want to thank the board for having this training. Very critical. I love that our diocese is thinking a step ahead and providing the resources so we can better prepare our students. So I pray that you can use these trainings, and the greatest benefit, I say this in every training, is that you use them. You can thank me by using these things in the classroom. So make it a benefit for your students. So again, it's great to see everyone. It's great to see your faces, all of you that have joined today. So I thank God Almighty and thank Tirumeni and the organizers for putting this session together.